Charles, this is a rare show where people don't realize this, but you've been busy today, and so you and I didn't have our normal opportunity to prepare. I came up with this idea, and first of all, welcome back. You're looking well. How are you tonight?
Thank you, sir. Everything's great here in the morning, Monday morning, awaiting the dropping of a column in American Thinker imminently. My brother's out here. That's why you didn't hear from me. We were very busy, and actually I went to sleep probably before you woke up.
Well, what I'm getting at is, before we get underway, I wanted to explain to you how I arrived at today's poster and obviously pose a question to you, because I think, Charles, most of our viewers, I know I have, come to rely on you as a kind of a voice of reason, but not only that, someone who has the ability to analyze these complex, global incidents from an economic standpoint, a social standpoint, a political standpoint. You're just someone who can evaluate, vast occurrences against history and your knowledge, and maybe give us some more insight, because what I've observed is that there seems to be two camps that have emerged. There's sort of the Tucker Carlson, Donald Trump is being, forced to do this by Israel, because Netanyahu wants to destroy Iran and they want to distract from Epstein. That's one side of it, and that we're being led into World War III and this is going to be a disaster. And then the other side of it is saying that this is, Trump actually knows exactly what he's doing, and that this is part of a broader plan to keep China at bay and avoid a large-scale nuclear war. And I don't know which it is, but I thought that you might have some good insights for us. And the Arabia part of it is, there was, these attacks happening in the United Arab Emirates, and basically Patrick Reveron was discussing with me another school of thought, which is that Iran's defense strategy is to basically attack everybody in this Gulf Cooperation Council, so that destroying them becomes kind of, you can't do it without destroying the economy. I don't know. What do you think about all that?
Yeah, well, that's some big questions. I think what's going on here is that Trump has now finally found his feet. When he entered the White House in January of 2017, he thought he had allies and friends in key positions, and history shows that he certainly didn't, and he may not have good friends or even friends in key positions now. But I think what the people who are pulling the strings in the Trump administration, and that would be Donald Trump and other people, understand that the system we put in place from 1948 onwards with the CIA and now 17 or maybe more deep state actors, it simply doesn't work. It hasn't served America's interests. And the people who operate this swamp have the ability, as you've personally discovered and as I've witnessed, to brand somebody a national security threat when that person is in fact protecting national security and not hostage to those who want a globalist system with no regulations and no effective laws, to allow dirty people around the world to try to launder trillions of dollars of dirty cash. So we think about the idea of foreign policy experts, and then the idea of the thugocracy pretending to be a religious government in Iran that has kept the people of Iran down for almost 50 years now, serving their own private interests. I've heard from people who I think have very good intelligence that the Khamenei family may have stolen $200 billion out of Iran. And that's just one of the many families that's been prominently involved in that thugocracy for whatever the math is, 48 years or so. So Trump understands that he only has a certain number of years left on the planet, that he's found himself in a position where he can actually fix these problems, or try to. And so he's going about the process of doing that. When you fix the thorny mess that is in the Middle East, as he's very close to doing, suddenly the idiots who like to get on private jets and fly to emergency peace summits or negotiation venues in, say, Geneva, they don't have any work to do because there's peace and the business people can take over and the footprint of our government can be reduced and the world can actually be a safer place. Who are the people who are not going to do well with that? The dirty people who Iran has been paying off and other countries have been paying off, the lobbyist groups, the people who use foundations as the Clintons and the Obamas and Bushes do to pretend, and the Blairs do in the UK, to pretend that they're advancing and protecting vulnerable people when in fact they're just taking off, and it could be just 5%, and that would be bad. But a third, a quarter, half the money that flows through these crooked foundations disappears. And the people, we saw what happened with Doge, how fiercely people immediately snapped back. The recipients of the largesse of USAID stolen money, those people are pissed. And whenever when you make big decisions, I've never been around government, so I don't know, but I would guess when you're making a decision, for example, to decide that it's fruitless to negotiate with Iran and that you're going to do something serious about it, you have to tell more than a couple of people. And I think the lesson of this mess so far is Trump cannot really trust even his trusted confidants, because at every turn, leaks go out to predictable organs, the Washington Post, you name the television network. And now what we have, we've lost perspective, I think, as in global consciousness. I remember the first Gulf War. The invasion by Saddam Hussein took place in early August 1990, and there was a lot of angst in the press. What are we going to do? Woe is me. How can we do something about this? Yes, no, da, 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 da. And then the initial campaign, I think it was launched around January 19th or thereabouts, 1991. And we had some patience back then. People understood that you're talking about a coalition of a lot of nations. You're talking about a very difficult military set of objectives. And people understood that things wouldn't be over in a week. Indeed, it took several months. And after that, the Middle East oil fields in Kuwait were ablaze for months. It took a long time to sort that out. Did we survive that? Yes, we did. Will we survive this? Yes, we will. Now, the dissonance in the coverage in legacy media is hilarious. On the one hand, you have immediately, Trump doesn't know what he's doing. His team doesn't know what he's doing. Hexus is over his head. Why aren't the Europeans, the fact that the Europeans aren't with us on this, that tells us that America is making a mistake. So everything we're doing is wrong if Trump's leading it. And then with regard to the Iranians, oh, these people are so smart. They're so wily. They've induced us into a trap where we're going to use up all of our armaments, and they're just going to have us bomb silhouettes of helicopters and planes. And then when we think we won, they're going to come out of the caves and blow up America, and America's going to lose. I think the most logical explanation I see so far is that we are kicking thugocracy ass, and we're going to continue to do it. America's going to do what America will do, and Israel is going to do things that we may not want to do. But so far, if you just look at the reported facts, and again, in the fog of war, you're not getting anything other than varnished truth out of us. We're not learning the truth, and nor should we, about the extent of casualties and losses that we may have taken at different bases around the world. And on the other hand, when we're certainly not broadcasting how many people may have been killed on the Iranian side, but the one thing that I see in the news reports is our bombing campaigns have, in number of bombs dropped, increased in geographic scale within Iran, widened, and the Iranian response is tapering down on a daily basis. That tells me that the strikes are effective. And if I were somebody on the ground, not at the very top of the thugocracy pyramid, being asked to do stuff where I could be killed, I'd be looking at my cards and say, I'd rather not be the Iranian version of Maduro. I don't want to get, I like to live a little while longer, so I'm not going to do, fight to the last civilian or military person to protect the thugocracy. I think at some point, the people will rise again. They rose in 2009. They rose in late last year and earlier this year. And I think at some point they're going to come out of the shadows and they're not going to tolerate this bullshit.
Yeah.
That's my view. I could be wrong, but that's my view.
Well, Charles, I know you're not in the business of giving out investment advice, but I think people are concerned about the impact that this might have on the economy. New York Times reported that gas prices were jumping and that oil has topped $90 for the first time in 2 years. I mean, what do you think of that?
These are people who the people who write for the legacy press are people who couldn't pass a ninth grade math class. I mean, inflation is certainly, let's say it's 3 to 5%. Just pick a number. How high did gas prices get in the first Gulf War? How high were they under Biden?
Yeah,
they're still well under where they were under Biden. And when you think about gas prices, yes, it can hurt. It does hurt people who need to purchase gasoline to drive cars. But on the other hand, there are oil companies. The value of the assets of those oil companies rises. So there are pluses and minuses. There are charts in the markets, frankly, in the future price of oil. And as of yesterday, those markets indicated that, yes, there could be a short-term spike, but the expectation is the situation at this moment will stabilize very quickly in a matter of months, if not weeks. So yes, the short-term price of oil is likely to go up.
Looks like it's shooting up right there. Well, yeah. I mean, this is the type of stuff, obviously, that people are worried about. What are the economic implications going to be? I was listening to some seemingly sensible analysis earlier today, talking about how, I mean, again, it was this whole Trump doesn't know what he's doing versus actually this is an incredibly well thought out thing. Sort of, there's no one in the middle, it's two sides of a seesaw or something like that. But the idea being that China was having so much influence in getting so much oil from Iran and also Venezuela, and that, we've basically neutralized Venezuela in that regard. And now perhaps this adventure in Iran is designed to do that. And I mean, again, it's not, as I thought about it, it doesn't seem like Trump is just antagonizing China. This is a complicated problem to deal with. If China decides they want to take over Taiwan, control Taiwan's semiconductor, and decide, hey, United States, not only do you not have any more, NVIDIA AI chips, no cars, no nothing, stranglehold on semiconductors, China could be plotting to control economically, in fact they are, with this Belt and Road and all this stuff, control the world.
Well, we are, in the first instance, and perhaps by design, most likely by design, nobody really understands the economic situation in Japan because the numbers are all invented. I mean, even with regard to our GDP, gross domestic product, which is one index of how well a country may be doing economically, those figures are based on estimates. And the one thing I can be very certain of is that most estimates, particularly those coming out of government cookbooks, are wrong. But anecdotally, when you think about the nation, the companies that are powering the likely future course of the global economy, how many of those are Chinese and how many of them are American? I mean, the American economy is an economy that has been functioning for 250 years, more or less, if you count the birth of the country as 1776. The Chinese economy was a dirt-based economy in 1970. It was 56 years ago.
Dirt is spiking.
Yeah, I mean, I and a lot of the most talented people who have a tie to China left the place long ago. Many settled here in Penang, where the economy is thriving. Others settled around Southeast Asia and America and elsewhere. So, the bigger question for me is, as somebody who's lived so far most of his life in a free country, do I want the world to be a place after I'm gone where people are living in 15-minute cities, fearful of Big Brother, whether that may be Chinese Big Brother, Indian Big Brother, or God forbid, Nazi Big Brother coming out of Germany and Switzerland? Or would I prefer to see humans have as much freedom as possible to act responsibly in the furtherance of their own interests and their own family's interests, and if they want to be generous, in the interests of their community, city, state, and country? This idea that we all ought to march off and listen to experts and live in fear of experts, as happened under the COVID period, should be, if we learn anything from it, that was a disastrous mistake. And think about where we were, being lectured on a daily basis by that Travelocity garden gnome, Dr. Fauci, spewing bullshit, affecting the lives and the psychological health of a generation of children around the world. Can we not learn from that mistake and move forward? There are many signs, independent of what's going on in the Middle East, that the Chinese miracle is a mirage. Indeed, they just, in the last several days, lowered their forward growth estimate to the lowest level, I think, in 50 years, or in a long period of time. The Chinese, before we consider the Middle East, the Chinese argument is that it's a stupid numbers argument. The Chinese have 4 times the number of people that we have. Eventually, their economy is going to be bigger than our economy. Their army, in theory, could beat our army, given its size advantage. And we ought to kowtow to them now, even though we're the world number 1. It's a ridiculous argument. It's an argument that was thrust upon us by George H.W. Bush and his thought leaders in the first Bush presidency. It's an argument probably born out of his experience as our special envoy to the People's Republic in, I think it was 1975. It's complete trash. And we are a net oil exporter. We do not need this oil in the Middle East or Venezuela. On the other hand, China does. China is in oil deficit. And we're not talking here, I don't think, about America going in and selling oil to Americans for less than the fair market value of the oil. This isn't about, I don't believe, military plunder. What it is about is turning the Middle East from a conflict zone, a zone of perpetual conflict, into a zone of potential peace. If we have a non-religious government, a sectarian government in Iran, then, and if that government were to recognize Israel, then it would be possible, not immediately, but in a short period of time, to really build out the Middle East, to remove this Shia-Sunni conflict, to stop these thugs. I mean, you got to remember what the Iranian government did. I mean, they financed terrorist movements that blew Americans up around the world, not simply in Iran. They were the primary engine of chaos in the Middle East. You remove this slugocracy, and you may really well have a once-in-a-generation lifetime to get things back on track. Now, having said all that, we have about the worst track record you could possibly think of trying to do anything in Iran. We pissed off people across the political spectrum in that country. And so I think where we are at this moment are there a group of founding mothers and fathers who want to rise up and credibly take control of the situation and lift the scars and deal with the scars created by this supposed group of religious leaders who I think, in fact, have been enriching their pockets and their families for a long time, and doing so most likely in league with the deep state. There's one report I just read preparing for this session on X, and it's not by an anonymous source, so I don't know if it's true or not, suggesting that the reason Tehran's skies are raining oil and are black now in daylight is that underneath Tehran is a pipeline that was taking oil from where it could be monitored to terminals, I think it said in Bandar Abbas, where Chinese ships could take that oil and evade sanctions. And that the volume of oil that had passed through this pipeline exceeds $1 trillion in value. So, what Trump is doing here may be an unbelievably complex and long overdue thing. And are there pitfalls in taking big risks? Of course there are. Is it bad that now 7 service people may have died in 8 days? Any death is bad. But when you think about a conflict of this magnitude, that number seems remarkably low to me. Not, and I don't minimize the loss, but in the scale of what's being taken on here, you would have thought the casualties would be much greater, and they're not. So far, so good. And,
right.
This is like going in and saying, God damn it, why isn't the World Trade Center built in 7 days? I mean, you can't do that. It's going to take some time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're going to have to see. It's hard to say. I mean, again, it does seem like Iran is not. I just don't know what to expect. People have said for a long time, even you were talking about how they have these hypersonic missiles from China to destroy aircraft carriers, and then I don't know. They seem to be not doing those sort of things, thankfully. But
yeah. I mean, in the era of Facebook likes and X likes, and you can get instant gratification courtesy of the internet now, the vehicles that are out there. That war is not, or these type of battles do not involve instant gratification. I mean, this is a heavy lift here, and I so far the signs that I see are encouraging. That could change. I mean, I'm grateful that there have been attacks inside the U.S. that have loose connections to terrorism. I don't know if they're actual terrorist acts yet. I'm very mindful of the risks posed to residents in New York City, in particular to you, Jason, and other people living in New York City. This is a very dangerous place to be right now. There are a lot of fools in New York City, thanks to Joe Biden. When we think about hand-wringing and anxiety, where was all that anxiety when the borders were open? And trendy Aragua people were...
When Biden, flubbed Afghanistan, everyone's like, oh, that was great.
And speaking of flubbing, in the free section, Biden gave that speech where he told a black audience, I think it was at the Jesse Jackson funeral.
Yeah, I'm smarter than you.
And it just made, and then Barack Obama used his ridiculous straw dog argument, casting your opponent as the boogeyman, and then, taking credit for all the things you're doing, making life difficult for the boogeyman at a funeral. And credit to Jesse Jackson Jr., who, by the way, the Biden administration put in jail for letting these doofuses speak and then getting up and saying to the audience, in effect, you don't know my father, because he wouldn't have wanted politics injected into this funeral. Good on Jesse Jackson Jr. And I think Jesse Jackson Sr. was a criminal psychopath. I'm no fan of him at all in his rainbow push grift exercise. But good on Jesse Jackson Jr. for saying politics have no place in a funeral. A funeral is...
Stick to dumb comments from Joe Biden. Well, Charles, we got a lot more to discuss, but we're out of time over here. People can join us in the First Amendment Forum on crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com or subscribestar.com or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. We've got a lot more to talk about, more news, more on Iran, and we'll be back in just 5 minutes. Stay with us, everybody.